actually don't really need this. Alright, so we chose to do a project on the Minority Report. It's a Steven Spielberg movie. Tom Cruise is the main character. The premise of the movie is that there is a law enforcement agency or pre-crime division of the government that was formed as an experiment with these three, what they call precogs or precognitives, people that are able to see murders, or at least bits and pieces of the murders between the three of them. They piece the pictures together, and then the main character, John Anderton, who Tom Cruise plays, basically goes in with his team and effectively stops the murders before they happen. So that's the basic premise of the movie. And we're going to talk about a ton of various, I guess, moral issues
Within the movie.
Yeah.
So obviously the first one that we kind of came up with was going to be whether it's morally right for somewhat the government to have these precogs that can predict whether a murder is going to happen and allow for somebody to be prosecuted for having or for murdering somebody before they even do it.
Right.
And so I kind of came up with no, it's not morally right, because there's a lot of different things that could possibly play into this of whether somebody's not going to murder somebody or not. I mean, you could have, they could plan this all out and then like something could happen to them like 20 minutes before they're about to murder somebody, and then basically it doesn't ever happen. So having this, and they could see what, like a week into the future?
I mean, it varied.
Okay.
I mean,
A week, 2 weeks.
Yeah, okay. So, but still, in that week, anything could happen that somebody could potentially like lose the ability of murdering somebody, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a very good system of doing it. It'd kind of almost have to be within like 6 hours kind of thing to be able to have somewhat of a justification for doing so and allowing somebody to be like arrested before they even commit a crime. So that's kind of my opinion, if you guys want to touch on that.
For me, I think it's good. Yeah, like they were able to stop people before they make some action, like before they make some bad stuff, like. But the thing is, after this, there's no judgment, there's nothing. They're just gonna stop you and you become a criminal. Like you enjoy the action, but you are a criminal, and they're just gonna stop you and put you put you somewhere, and I don't know, freeze you or something.
Yeah,
like
put
that.
the halo around you and basically make you relive the moment over and
That's
over.
the morality they say. I don't know, like from the first story of the movie, like that guy, his wife doesn't respect him, and he got a kid. The kid doesn't care about him, and his wife is actually cheating on him. So, and he was mad. Like everybody would do that. Like I found my wife, someone is, I don't know, is having some relation with my wife. I found them. I would do something, but after they got them, like they stopped him, they gotta check like what made him to do that action. They don't want to know. They just stop him and like, you are under arrest, and that's it. That's so bad. I feel so bad for this guy. I was like, no, that's not right.
Yeah.
So that's a good point of like why they're committing the action, because it could be in personal defense. Like I didn't really think about that, but I mean, you're technically not. You are murdering, but in a personal defense situation, if you kill somebody, you're usually convicted of murder, depending on the situation. But at the same time, like,
so
if you get committed for this before you even do it, I mean, I guess you're saving yourself, kind of. But it's also
Kind of actually going along with that note, one thing that I picked out was that in a traditional judicial setting, you have evidence that either proves you did or did not kill somebody. So when you have this scenario of stopping a crime before it happens, you have no evidence to support you not committing the crime in the future. So there's no evidence to exonerate you, and therefore it's like, well, how do you have both the legal basis and the moral basis of holding a person who hasn't committed a crime, or who there's potential, I mean, it may change, they may not end up committing the crime at all, so yeah.
So I think also going off of that, as we talked about the precogs, there's only technically one that has to see the event happening in order for it to be acted upon.
Well, they need all three, but like Agatha is the one that like she's much smarter and much
Yes,
more
yes,
than the
yes.
others.
Yeah,
so like without
she's-
her,
she's- yeah.
She's the key
So
one.
it's also kind of a thing where if this were to be implemented, it has to be like 100% like going to happen. Well, everybody sees it basically. If there were to be precogs like in our world, everybody has to see it as like not at the same time, but it has to be
Viewed in the same way,
Yeah.
predicted,
Yeah.
or in at least a corroborating way.
yes, like all of them have to come like somewhat come together and be like, hey, I saw this, and then you can kind of.
you think there should be more than three?
I think it would help. I think
Like
if
the larger the number you
the
have,
larger the number,
would definitely
the more
reduce
people
the amount
could
of error.
potentially, yeah, the less error.
If 10 people agree compared to 3 people agreeing, but then again, like the more people you add, like you're morally like doing something wrong in a way. Maybe you're saving them from the brain damage, but like after they're treated and like since they're able to like see these precogs, does that also mean like that they're more functioning? They should be able to like live on their own, like they get to at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I can agree with that in one sense, but also I see a potential flaw with that in that. So you got Agatha, and then the twins,
Mhm.
and they're all siblings and related. This wasn't really like a condition that they tested into or whatever. Like it was kind of shall we say, a miracle of sorts that it
Yeah.
happened. So it's not something that you can really
Fine.
artificially create. But even if you did, as soon as you introduce more and more people, you're introducing more bias, you're introducing more personal opinion, more potential for error. I think that could be a big issue that would need to be addressed. But also too, I mean, you're creating an entire system of judicial justice that's based
That's
around,
No evidence.
exactly, it's based around
Basically,
visions.
it's a trust.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of
Mhm.
like you're trusting these precogs that what they're seeing.
Yeah.
They could basically make something up.
Listen.
I feel like, like they could make something completely up that they didn't even see in order for somebody to be arrested, kind of thing.
right.
So
Mhm.
it's also just
There, I mean,
it's spotty. on
to
that.
to its benefit, or to its credit, I should say, the one thing is that the murder rate had dropped to, what was it, next to nothing
Yeah,
in the
it's
DC
low.
area where it
There
was
have been
being
none in
enacted.
6 years.
Yeah,
Or something crazy
Yeah.
like that.
and I mean that's pretty
That's insane.
incredible, but at the same time, there's always the question of, well, yeah, you could put everybody in jail and nobody committed a crime. But how many of those people actually are legitimate criminals that commit
Exactly.
a crime?
Yeah,
And
How
it
many
kind of
times-
goes back to what I said of like,
Yeah.
who knows if they're gonna actually commit the crime?
Right.
Like you don't know. So
How many of those people did they throw in jail without like knowing about the Minority Report and whether or not they might have not actually done it? And the whole basis of like arresting someone before they've done anything, like whether or not it's morally right or wrong, legally it's like completely wrong.
Right.
Which
Mhm.
like I'd say in today's
Yeah, I mean,
standards,
there's no
we-
due process.
I'd say in
You're
today's
literally thrown
standards-
into a halo, and then you're forced to basically relive the moment that you,
didn't even live yet.
yeah,
Which
exactly.
Yeah.
kinda,
And the thing is,
Over and over and
everybody
over.
gonna see you like a criminal for something you didn't do. Like you don't make action, you kill no one, bro. People gonna see you like this guy's a criminal.
Mhm.
That's no, I don't know.
Yeah, anytime you're officially labeled as a criminal, even if you're not, it's
Mhm.
it's harmful to your reputation.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it? Just recently, there was a college student that was
Football player.
football player that was accused of rape or
Lost
whatever
his
years ago.
scholarship, banned from like the campus. Like,
Yeah, bunch of things. Went to jail for, I think it was several years, and then his accuser finally came forward and said, "No, that this didn't actually happen. That guy's reputation was ruined up until that moment where he was exonerated by her saying that no, this was in fact false." But yeah, I mean, in the movie, it's there's this shot where they basically take a person, they put them in a halo. They are effectively a vegetable. They're stood upright with the halo around, and then you can see what they're watching, and it just repeats over and over and over. And although there's no physical anguish, it's depicted as
It's
this.
definitely mental.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like being trapped inside a body that's not yours, and you're like screaming, but nobody else can hear you.
That's exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, there's that big issue.
And also, it's kind of like, for certain people, say you have like a mass murder versus someone who killed one single person. How long is it going to take for them to kind of, when they're in the halo, how long are you going to leave them in the halo?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how long do they need to see these things in order to kind of, I guess, see it's wrong? That's kind of the point of doing it, I guess.
I'm assuming just because of like the way the actual legal system works, that they were probably in there for the rest of their lives. The system itself had only been implemented for like 5 or 6 years in the movie, so we don't really have like. I mean, with that,
Yeah.
I'm assuming it was like life in prison pretty much.
Yeah.
So that's more like life in hell.
Pretty much,
It
yeah.
effectively reduces the population,
Yeah.
pretty much. But also,
No one's dying.
This is true.
well,
Population's not going down as much.
it's
but
not going down,
murder
but
doesn't really make up a huge percentage of the deaths in most parts of the world.
Yeah, that's true.
They shut it.
I'd say the economic prosperity.
well, I think
Definitely
economically,
increases,
well, at the same time though, I guess you don't have to take care of them, really.
Yeah, I mean that's not really an issue.
It's
It's
not
like
like
addressed in the movie. But
Yeah,
I mean,
it's not like an imprisonment where
there's all
your
kinds of logistics.
taxpayers
things.
are paying.
They
for
obviously
it.
already have technology beyond what we have. It
Yeah.
could cost a lot of money to keep someone in that per year, but I doubt
With it
that's
doesn't
like
really
the
go over
focus
it.
of like the issue.
Yeah.
You can make an argument for that though, that it's morally right or wrong, based off of how it's going to affect the outside people
Yeah.
that aren't being accused, and how like the public is going to pay for the situation of them being held.
Prison. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
There's no real system of reform that's mentioned in the movie. I think probably just because.
Never happened in the first place. Like how someone's supposed to learn about something that they did when they
Right.
haven't committed it yet.
Exactly, and I think that's another thing that's important to bring up is I think to some degree there was this concern for the morality of even an operation that existed that was like this, and that's why the internal auditor came in and was like, everything has a fault, and that fault is human. So I'm here to ensure that human error is either completely eliminated or minimized enough that it's still justifiable to have a program like this. So yeah, I think kind of enough on that particular topic. Next topic I had was, is the future really the future if you're changing it?
Oh no.
Because I mean the entire premise of the precogs is that they see a set future. And although this is an experiment, you're still exposing, what was it, a team of 5 or 6 people, I think, total, to a future that was being displayed to them. But I mean, there's always this argument of, if you know the future, are you able to change it? Or by knowing that future, are you actually setting yourself up to achieve the outcome of whatever predicted future happens? So it is kind of interesting, especially within John Anderton, the main character's scenario, because Agatha and the twins, they saw an outcome of John murdering somebody. And John obviously, I mean,
He knew.
he knew, So there's the idea of, well, maybe he can change his own destiny, but at the same time, he could be working himself towards that. But I think this is one of the key turning points in the movie, because it shows how there is a flaw in the system, and that is, you know, what can be perceived by the precogs as murder can actually be completely the opposite scenario.
It's almost like
it was almost like a accident in a way.
But it's almost like also if you took everybody that they're seeing murdering and said, hey, X amount of days you're gonna murder somebody, like fix it. Say reevaluate them like a couple days later or something like that. Do they still see it? And that would be more of a justifiable way of kind of imprisoning them, because they already know, so they can either choose to fix the problem or like keep going about their life and end up committing murder, which at that point then you can have, it's obviously more justifiable of reasoning.
It is, yeah, but I think the crucial part of that stance is that you have to address that human nature. There are then people that genuinely do want to murder people. It's not just like,
which is
oh my
why,
gosh, I'm murdering this guy. Like, what? I
which
had no
is
idea,
why like
so.
you'd have like a second evaluation kind of thing.
Right. It kind of gets into the logistics of it gets into the logistics of things where, I mean, it's like, okay, so if I tell this person they're going to murder somebody, they may already know that, but now they're like, oh crap, I got to figure out another way to murder this person. So from the law enforcement point of view, they've now got to monitor this person up until the predicted future of this person's
I think
murder.
We're also just trying to give it a reason of it being justifiable to do this, because we're obviously in agreement this is morally wrong, this whole system.
Conceptually, yeah, if you can
Just
rely
because-
100% on a system that says this murder will happen,
It's
I think we all
100%
agree that would
every
be an
time.
awesome system to have
Oh,
in
yeah.
place. It's the implementation of it in this movie that really presents the problem, because it's an experiment led by, for all intents and purposes, 3 psychics, shall we say. And you look at,
With a corrupt leader,
with a corrupt leader.
always helps.
So I mean, there's so many different variables of this movie that just, it's kind of hard to wrap your brain
Kind
around.
of also just kind of brings down like a basically fall of the system, because
Yeah, I have faith in the system even if it is wrong, but
well, and then it kind of brings up like when people start, I guess, going against it. I mean, sort of in the situation of the movie, like people are gonna figure it out, sort of, and like are people gonna agree with it, and then what's gonna happen, kind of thing. So
I think the one time in the movie the system was like went against was when Anne Lively was murdered, like because the twins saw the same like vision, but Agatha saw a different one, and like he knew that, so he used that to like murder her without getting seen. So like I feel like otherwise, if you don't work within the system, you couldn't really like go against it within like the confines of the capital city.
true. I think even if I remember correctly, that there's a point in the movie where they were talking about premeditated murder being instantly recognizable. So most murders that were taking place now were very spontaneous, because anything that's premeditated was seen in advance, which is why I think you guys are in the beginning. You're talking about how it could be a few hours or it could be several weeks. Premeditated things are always weeks in advance.
First degree murder, yeah.
Right, because you're obviously thinking about it in advance, but
That's why the potential like murder passion from the beginning of the movie, like the person like they really had to like get on the go like for that.
exactly, yeah, because it was I think 23 minutes or something like that, like
It
really
was something crazy.
really close up. Because I mean, that particular murder was one where I don't think the husband was planning to kill his wife. He just had suspicions, and in the heat of the moment, with emotions and hormones all over the place, he just I think we can all attest to the fact that human nature says that, you know, there's going to be times where we just react in ways that we don't think we would ever react.
Yeah.
But you can't really say until you're in the moment. So
So going back to your future changing thing, you can kind of look at it as if like a time machine were invented. If you went back in time and changed something, like say a president that didn't get elected or something like that, would that be morally right? It's kind of the same situation of like accepting the future. Like you're changing the future. So
well, I mean, there's
I
like
kind of think that's
there's a million different connections being made just in a single action that we make. So it would absolutely change the future.
That's why like it's kind of, you can look at it either the past or the future, and it's kind of immoral just because you're not allowing nature to take its course basically.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
yeah.
All in if you believe in nature versus or nurture, like honestly, that.
Well, yeah.
Let's see. I
What
guess
is your point again
Hmm?
about
Which point?
what you had earlier?
so many different things are interconnected. It's kind of hard to remember.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about me.
Oh, you're talking to me?
No. You?
Oh, so he was talking to you.
Yeah.
What was I talking about?
The point earlier when he wasn't here yet.
Oh, like before we started
Yeah.
recording. Oh, I was talking about how like the person that like put the system into place was like did it all for their own personal benefit.
Yeah.
That,
Which,
that's
like,
that's actually a good
yeah.
point because we've referenced this person without really naming him, but there's I don't even remember his name because he only shows up.
Burgess. Yeah,
Burgess. Okay. There's this guy named Burgess who's basically the person who's
President.
implemented and oversees the operation of pre-crime. So the man directly below him is John Anderson, who is the chief of police in this division. He's the person that ends up, as we discover, killing Anne Lively, who is Agatha. Agatha is one of the precogs. But Burgess ends up killing Anne Lively, who is Agatha's mom.
Yeah.
So before we started recording, we were addressing the issue of, you know, is Burgess setting up the system entirely for his own use because he kind of manipulates it so that he doesn't get caught for the murder of Anne Lively. But at the same time, in a weird twisted sense of morality, he wants the system to be implemented in full effect so that it can prevent other murders. So it's kind of a
He wants to
Full
be
hypocrisy.
he
He's an
wants to
A
be-
plus hypocrite.
Yeah, he
for
wants
sure.
to induce good, but at the same time he's covering his own back
Yeah.
from.
I mean, I think
The thing
it's
is, he was using Agatha and the twins, so like, and mom, Agatha mom was like, she wanted her daughter.
She wanted her back.
Yeah, she wanted her back. So if he was like, he gave back like Agatha to her mom, he was able to do all this and got his money, became rich, and got his honor. So he could just stop Agatha's mom by killing her. So that's why I think that's why he killed her. He's not actually the bad guy.
yeah, in his mind, it's like, you know, a small sacrifice for the greater good.
Sounds like he definitely is a utilitarianism believer from that aspect because like he's
Overall-
like murdering
overall
this one
happiness.
person will
Mhm.
save
Yeah.
more people from being
Save more
murdered.
people.
It's the greatest happiness
Yeah.
principle, which definitely seems
Kind of brings up, which in reality, the whole idea is meant for the greater good. Like the whole idea is to reduce murder, which it does. It's just like, is it right to go about doing it this way?
It's the implementation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is the kind of question that you have to take into account. And so, yeah. I guess we could kind of talk of whether we all think it's morally right or wrong, and then how we can maybe make it morally right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we're all in agreement that it's kind of a morally wrong issue within the
because
movie.
it's not a flaw-proof system.
Yeah, there's so many things that could happen within the system that, I mean, can
we're
change
not
can
in-
change the course of the
The
future.
only thing that makes this answer hard is that since it is murder, if like you don't do something about it before and it actually happens, that's like a one-way mistake. Like nothing can, like you can't bring a person back and like say, let me retry that. Let me actually arrest
Yeah.
this person and
Yeah.
put him in jail.
Yeah, so
You don't know that.
there's
There's the uncertainty of that.
and
Yeah, I mean, I see that. At the same time, I'm also thinking though, by doing that, we're placing a responsibility that we never originally had of preventing murder on ourselves, and we're kind of placing ourselves in what effectively is a godlike.
I was about to say into the
Situation.
hand of
I mean, you're controlling the future.
So I guess
So-
kind of the argument that we should be making is how do we make it morally right, which is going to be kind of who's put in charge kind of thing, like how does the system become what it is in order to make it less flawed, which, I mean, it's hard to really do.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many cultural.
I mean, obviously-
differences, religious differences.
Yeah,
that would
obviously-
completely counter.
You want to make it overall for the greater good, but at the same time, it kind of goes back to that thing of like, if somebody murders somebody in self-defense, like, how are you going to make it justifiable to be able to imprison them versus not imprison them? Because either way, it's murder no matter what, and that's what the system is there to reproduce. So,
Yeah, it's implementing a system that can't possibly be controlled with our current knowledge.
They'd
yeah,
have to be
things
able
that
to
happen.
I mean, it's kind of
it's
like,
effectively impossible to create a perfect implementation of this because
They have to be able to completely eliminate the minority report, but also Agatha was she's the only one that ever gives them, but she's also like the only reason that the system was held together in the first place. And like, I feel like the smarter of like a more intelligent of a precog you have or whatever, I feel like there's more of a chance they're gonna have a minority report because they understand something different could happen.
and it's almost kind of like you need, instead of actual, like, basically humans, they're not, the precogs aren't exactly word for word human, but it's almost like you need kind of a robot that's seeing the future rather than like human, because like we said earlier, they can make things up, they can skew what they see, like they can, there's
But
a lot
if
of,
the AI is developed by a human, would it still have a bias according
it's gotta be made by the public. Like, it has to be made
by like
by everybody for the overall greater good, pretty much. And I mean, it still makes it difficult though, because
I'd even say it's still impossible because I mean every human is flawed.
well, that's what I'm saying. Is
Even
like
if you
these
have-
people that are murderers and like intend to are going to be part of the public creating this system. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
they're already going to try to flaw it themselves in order to get around it, which also brings in the good of this movie is nobody really knows about it. So it's not like the public in general can like change how they're going to do things or the way they're going to murder people, because they don't really know that they're going to get convicted before they actually do it. So that's something that if you were to come together as like public and make this system, everybody knows about it. So, and I feel like everybody would know the rules and guidelines, and there definitely everybody would try, or some people would try to get like around it somehow. So
I feel like if I plan on killing someone in a city where they got like psychics that could like tell them I'm about to kill someone, I feel like I decide against to kill someone personally.
well, yeah, I mean, but at the same time, like, you're not the crazy
I'm not a
person that's like a
psychopath.
murderer.
I'm not a
like,
psychopath.
Yeah, so it makes it hard to kind of relate, but at the same time, yeah, I don't know.
It was pretty advertised in the movie, like the pre-crime. Like it like showed up in his like eyeballs and stuff. That was crazy.
Yeah, there's so many different things that were touched on in that movie. And it's all set in the future. It's like 2054, I think. Or
Yeah,
45,
which-
54. Not too far off in the distant future. I can see that technology taking place.
Some
we
sort
already
of-
have
some sort of
virtual reality.
technology.
We already have augmented reality. We already have
That's pretty much just like
facial recognition, retinal recognition. Apple store,
Well-
every time you walk into a store, they use facial recognition to queue up who came in first, and who to help.
Really?
Yeah.
That's actually pretty
So, I
cool.
mean, that kind of technology is already being used. So, I mean, there are parts of the movies where.
Which it also comes in like this has to be more of like a technology kind of thing rather than human because there's so much human there.
Yeah.
Which so it's almost like obviously kind of the Big Brother idea, like everybody's being watched over by a group of people, but it's all through technology. Like it has to be,
Mhm.
which I kind of you do get the feeling it's ran by technology in the movie, but at the same time you don't. Just because they have great technology that is allowing them to do this, but at the same time it's still the humans like running the show kind of.
It's still on the borderline. I mean,
Mhm.
so John Anderson is portrayed as like the chief who's in control
Mm-hmm.
of the system. I say they're kind of at the brink. They're still ultimately the people that make the decisions in the end as to what happens, but through consumerism, like with retinal detection, when John Anderson had to switch his eyes out for
It was some-
Mr. Okinawa or whatever his name was. When he walks into a store and they're talking about Okinawa's shopping habits, and it's like, oh, welcome back. Here are some options for you to choose from, or whatever. So you're kind of on the edge of leaving humanity out of decisions being made through consumerism and just through judicial system and things like that. But they're just like right on the brink.
Yeah.
So
they're
Which
pretty close.
also, I think it would be effective to like test without testing kind of thing. Like test the system, see what might happen, and then see if it actually happens. Like without like keeping your hands off kind of thing.
But then
So like
got murdered.
they
potentially
figured
murdered
this
so
out
many
in the movie,
conscious.
and maybe in the next 2 years they edit the system in order to do better, basically.
yeah.
But it also comes up like who comes up with the system and for what reason, which goes back to Burgess,
Whether
like,
or not he completely
for what reason.
money
True.
in a twisted
Yeah.
sense of righteousness.
Yeah.
I think an interesting thing to talk about would be what are some of the flaws that you do see in the system, and how would you personally change it? Because probably the biggest flaw I see, well, there's two of them. The biggest flaw being human error, because we're all
Everybody's
we're all
different.
fallible, we're all imperfect. The second being controlling a vision. I mean, science, yeah, you can put electrodes around your brain or whatever, and they can read different brain activities based on different actions being taken, and they can get a general sense of what's going on. But science is not advanced enough to, actually go in and physically see what you're actually seeing and feeling.
Not now.
Not now, yeah. But
I mean, and who knows when that kind of thing comes up,
yeah.
Like who knows when it is made.
Sooner than later.
But it's trusting doped up kids, basically.
Pretty much.
So I guess in the movie their justification was the fact that murder had dropped to nothing within 6 years, which certainly
Which-
seems
Kind of in the utilitarian idea of Mill is the overall consequence is good because murder dropped. That
Right.
was the goal.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I feel like if you look at other moral like theories, just from like us, I mean, we all kind of have a moral theory ourselves. We're all saying it's wrong because there's so many flaws in the system. So,
well, I mean, at
You
its
also-
core, you're removing free will
Mhm.
completely. So it's
I think it also kind of could depend on what country this is being implemented in, because obviously in the U.S. we're granted a huge amount of freedom to
Mhm.
basically do whatever we want, whereas other countries it's not the exact same. So it could be more effective depending on the country as well.
So doesn't like freedom like give the potential for more like
Yeah.
murders done by
Yeah.
the public, because obviously in countries where there's like corruptness from the government, murder by the government, they will never implement a system like that. That would literally have
At
like,
least then the government falls.
yes, the government
So-
collapses. You have a coup d'état. And that's,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What were you about to say?
Oh, I was like, this year, like that year, there's no more freedom, I guess, because Agatha and the twins, they got no freedom. Like they're just using them for their own purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Well-
They're free, and they're not happy.
Yeah, that was even one thing that I wrote down. Was like, they're effectively slaves that are
Yeah.
kept in a
Kind of slave.
called a fishbowl for all intents and purposes.
it's-
Yeah.
it
Um,
really is fishbowl.
Yeah, pretty much. It is a fishbowl, but there was no mention in the movie as to whether or not they have the freedom to just walk out.
I don't think they do.
Yeah, it's kind of.
Well, they
implied-
definitely did not with Burgess running the system,
Yeah.
but like obviously at the end, like that changed.
Yeah.
Right. It's removing the freedom of the few for, I guess, the good of everybody else.
But also, like, I think kind of the intent of this in the movie is kind of a baseline of whether they can use it for all crime as well. Which
What?
then, I mean,
Although
it
they
doesn't-
did
it
make a
doesn't
comment at the
specifically
very
say that.
beginning. They did make a comment at the beginning that kind of led away from that. They were saying, so he was like, "What about other crimes?" He was like, "No," and it's something about like the way like the brain like conceptualizes before murder. It's like how the brain thinks before murder. They
Yeah,
said it was a
that's
much
true.
more like defined thought than like other crimes and what you're thinking before that. Because if you're about to like go steal something, that could be the most impulsive decision you literally ever made. You could be in Target or like Kohl's and
Yeah,
something.
But
Take
yeah,
it.
that's what I'm saying though, is if like you,
If it could get to
if
that
it's
point.
implemented in all crime, like that just takes basically all freedom away. Not really, but freedom of, I guess, committing crime. Pretty much.
You basically fail to acknowledge that everybody has bad in them. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
by
Mhm.
implementing a system where they're implicating all crimes, you are
You want humans to be flawless.
exactly, which
Which
you can't. You
said
can't. I
it's
mean,
not
anybody,
possible.
no matter how self-righteous you are, will have to admit that you're not a god. You're not perfect.
Pretty much everybody in their life does something at one point in time. I feel like that they're not supposed to do.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So like at that point, pretty much everyone's imprisoned if it's to go to that standard. And at that point, I mean, what do you have left? The people running the show, pretty much. So
In utopian societies, y'all have read any novels, they usually do not work out and they usually turn into dystopian societies. So like without crime, it could almost end up like the movie, the book The Ender's Game,
Mm-hmm.
which like it's supposed to be like a beautiful world and it's
Right.
the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Or can you think The Giver, maybe the book, where like they try to like
Yeah.
hide everyone from like all
From
emotions,
knowledge.
which just like
Right.
ends up like making everyone like. I feel like it'd be similar like if like no one committed crime, the entire world would just be a whole bunch of like walking dolls, walking puppets.
Exactly. As robots. All right. So now that we've kind of acknowledged that the system, in effect, kind of
Needs work.
well, yeah, obviously it needs work, but effectively makes you a god. I'm curious to know, the system makes the people a god. If anybody in this room has beliefs outside that, where like another being or sorts would play a role in this at all.
I mean, that's all your own personal like.
yeah.
Or I guess the better way to rephrase that is,
Within-
what would your own personal beliefs, like just kind of as a general roundness, or keeping the conversation well-rounded, if any of you guys hold beliefs of other beings?
Yeah, I guess so.
like-
So kind of what you're asking is like,
How would our beliefs affect
beliefs-
our
Right.
like perception of it? if
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
okay?
yeah. Which obviously is going to change depending on the person. I mean, and we all in here agree that this system seems to be morally
Right.
correct. but that could also be because of our beliefs, which, I mean, I'm Christian, I believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like almost all Christians who believe in God are going to look at this system and view it as immoral.
Exactly.
Because
Giving judgment.
it's just so many flaws, and ideally, you're not supposed to be flawed.
Yeah.
Who's running this, like, the government isn't supposed to be flawed, like everything should be quote unquote flawless. That's what we strive for. That's what we strive for.
Creating a flawless system is impossible.
Yeah, yeah. So, but obviously, like, if you take a murderer, they're probably, well, they're not going to agree with the system, but if you said, like, would this be a good way to get rid of murder, they'd probably say, yeah, that's a good way. So,
They would agree with the fundamentals, but like morally, they would not agree with it. Like they would agree with what the system is
well,
going with.
morally because they're a murderer, but I feel like the majority of people,
They don't want.
based off of, like, I guess feelings towards other people, wouldn't want people to be imprisoned for something they don't even do. And I mean, like you said, you may never commit actual crime. So, and that just seems to come up over and over again. It's, I think, like, people, I feel like an overwhelming majority of people wouldn't agree with this kind of a system because there's too many flaws in the system. So,
Yeah, I'd definitely be very curious to.
I'd like to
a
hear
poll and
somebody
different-
that, like, would agree with it. I'd like to hear their kind of thoughts on it because
I know.
you can, like, obviously we disagree with it, and like we try to give a reason for it to be okay, like for the system to be okay, and like we give reasons of how it could be improved, but I feel like we'll never really feel like the system is
Well, yeah.
possible, basically.
Especially with like the way
Unless-
society is, the technology we have today, like it's gonna be hard to get like someone from like this era to like believe at this moment in time like the system is morally right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Its intentions have like good
Yeah, all the
moral
intentions are-
worth, but like it's like,
Which goes-
we don't know how many people are, like I said, we're putting like to the Halo thing that like weren't even gonna do anything
Well,
because
that
like
kinda-
they threw away Agatha's Minority
I guess
Report.
you could say like a utilitarianism / consequentialism is they'd agree with it because in the end, I mean, though
In the end, the outcome
In
is-
the end, you have,
you got what
overwhelmingly
you
good.
want.
In the end, you have
So-
like 4 or maybe 4 murders in 6 years. Well, actually, let's see. How many did Burgess kill? 2 people, and John
I mean, either
killed
way,
someone.
yeah.
Yeah, you've had only 4 murders in 6 years, so like
Yeah.
consequentially, it definitely like had more human good than like human harm, as far as we know.
If you wanted to isolate the division and say that its sole purpose is to eradicate murder, and you don't take any other moral or ethical, I don't know, equations into account, then I'd say yeah, it's a success. But it's the fact that, you know, as humans, everything we do is intimately integrated into how we operate. We don't typically compartmentalize things and say,
No.
this is okay, and this, well, to some degree we do. We conflict our own beliefs, I think, depending on the ease of the situation. But, yeah. Did you have another thing?
I just like want to say that I think the system was kind of success because it stopped more like how many years? You think? 6 years. Yeah, so everybody would like to believe in this because maybe in the beginning they're gonna be like, oh, what is this kind of shit? You know?
Yeah.
As long as it stopped murders and they got like everybody's good, so they can be in the lane.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Overall,
Yeah.
it accomplishes the goal, but
At what
it's just
like,
the
cost to,
it's
like-
just the argument of, is it morally right
At what
to
cost to
do
people's
this?
rights?
Yeah.
Like,
and
legally
save
and
people
just
from
as
sick too.
humans.
So
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
We're good. Does anybody have anything else?
I'm not gonna say like my religious beliefs, but like regardless if like you've read through the Bible, which I have, and like God is super powerful, why would you like want like humans to have like a power that like that deity has?
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's, I guess, for those that don't believe kind of thing, which, I mean, say if the government creates it, it's kind of the idea that, like, obviously the government doesn't believe in God because then they want this superpower to be able to kind of rule over everybody. So, it also
Yeah,
goes
I-
back to what country it's in, because, I mean,
100%.
like, in the U.S., I mean, there's so many different cultures of so many people believing in different religions that it would make it hard. Whereas if you went to like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like,
Small island country.
yeah, some smaller country. I mean, I know a lot of South American countries are pretty strict about what their religion is. So, like, if you
Yeah.
did that, then
Yeah.
it could be maybe more agreed upon. But at the same time, like,
I feel like it's pretty heavily a certain denomination, Catholicism.
Yeah. It's very true. All right. Anything else?
Oh yeah, probably.
I want Chris Perkins.
I'm Nate Johnson.
Really?
I'm Asher Pennington. No, I'm joking. Andrew Kirby. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to this broadcast of
Is it right?
Minority
Minority
Report
Report
debates.